Morning, everybody. I'm going to start with an apology because I only know one word in Turkish. It is teşekkür ederim. So, thank you. So I want to talk today. I think it's really nice that the theme of the conference is end-to-end agile mind shift, because that's exactly what I want to talk about. I want to talk about some of the foundational ideas that are fundamental to the way in which agile thinking works, and continuous delivery, my thing in particular, is one of the reasons why this works. This is meant to be a slightly amusing, slightly light-hearted idea. It's early in the morning, we've just had our coffee, it's the start. I'm not going to hit you with ideas that are too heavy or too complicated, but maybe tricky to digest nevertheless. And this is the subtitle I thought: the world makes a lot more sense as soon as you realise that we don't know what we're talking about. So, a long time ago in a canteen far away, that was me, I was doing the sort of thing that you do when you're sitting with a bunch of friends. And I used to work in this organisation, and there were a bunch of us that got on really well. And as you do when you're working in that sort of environment, you know, at lunchtime we used to eat together, and we used to sit in the canteen, and we used to kind of discuss the problems of work and the world and all those sorts of things. And we used to come up with silly ideas about why the world was the way it was, why our software projects were the way they were. Actually, it looks a bit more like this than the first picture. And then a few years later, one of the people that I was sat with, who was a good friend of mine, is Martin Thompson, quoted me. He actually slightly misquoted me. So as soon as you realise that the people don't know what they're doing, the world makes a lot more sense. And you know, we came up, as part of this conversation, we came up with this idea of 3 laws, and amongst this small group of friends, they became kind of a standing joke, Farley's 3 laws, a way of characterising what we're going on. So here are my 3 laws. People are crap. Stuff's more complicated than you think. And all stuff is interesting, it just depends on how you look at it. So first of all, I want to start by making it clear that I am from England, in the United Kingdom. And in English, maybe as opposed to American English, saying that people are crap is not quite as rude. It's not quite as bad-mannered as it might be in other forms of English. What we mean when we talk about crap is that it's a bit rubbish. It's not terribly good. We're not quite as smart as we think we are. So I don't mean this to be very rude. I don't mean all of those people over there are crap and all of us people over here are wonderful. I mean that we're all crap. We're all a bit rubbish. This is my theme today. So I want to go through and I want to talk about these 3 laws and try and explain to you what I mean and hopefully win you over and get you to agree. This is part of what I had in mind. What on earth was this woman thinking? Crazy. Actually, this is more what I had in mind. I'd be really interested to know what was going through this man's head. It's in mid-air and his wheels are falling off. What do we do now? This is my mental model of the human species. You know, we kind of think of ourselves as these rational, sensible beings, and actually, we're not. So, let's start. Who here thinks, I can't see very well, but hands up if you think that you're rational? Come on, more of you than that. You're in a room full of engineers, right? Okay, well, there's a small group. Even the small group, I'm afraid you're wrong. So if you were in a meeting situation and you wanted to convince the people in the meeting that your ideas were the best ideas, and you wanted them to go away believing the things that you wanted them to believe, what the psychologists say is the most important thing that you can do. Is it how good your argument is, how good your presentation is, how smart your suit is? It's none of those things. It's how good the food is that you supply in the meeting. How good your clothes are, your argument, none of that stuff matters as much as how good the cookies are. Seeing's believing. Our primary sense, our primary input system is visual. And so, we talk about seeing being believing, and we believe that the rules of our eyes. So let's start with that. People are poor observers. Anybody notice that I misspelled R? Yeah? Good if you did. So let's try that out. Let's see. So that's a bit strange, right? So my bet is that you're all trying to work out what kind of clever arrangement of magnets is going on to make this work. Actually, it's a matter of perspective. Let's look at some more of these sorts of things. This is a picture that took over the press in the UK for about 3 months, a couple of years ago. This is from the people laughing, I assume that you saw this too. So this dress, there were huge arguments of whether this was white and gold or blue and black. Let me simplify the picture and show you what was going on. This is a simpler version of the same optical illusion. So here we've got two squares, square A and square B. Could I have a show of hands? Who thinks that square A is darker in colour than square B? Okay, who thinks that square B is darker in colour than square A? Nobody. Okay, so actually, they're the same shade. That's strange, right? So what's going on here? We're looking at the scene, and what our brains are doing, they're saying, okay, well, I know square B is in shade while square A is in the light. Therefore, I know that must be darker than this to be that colour. And we're making up the difference. There's a lot more going on here than we think. I'm going to show you a few more of these sorts of optical illusions. If you could stare at the dot for just a few seconds, and then I'm going to show you just a blank white sheet. So if you stared at the dot, you should now see a copy of the flag of my country kind of in its normal colours. I'm not doing that because I'm a nationalist or anything like that. It's just happens that I found the illusion. Here's another one, which is even better. Again, just stare at the dot in the centre of the image for a few seconds. And what I'm going to show you is I'm going to show you a black and white picture of the castle, and you're going to see it in full colour. And when you move your eyes around, you'll see that it's in black and white. It's an odd illusion, isn't it? You can see the colours in the image, but when you move your eyes around, you can see that it's actually in black and white. This is not cheating, this is just there's no colour in this image, it's just black and white. What's going on here is that the processing in our eyes, the chemical reaction in the way that our eyes work is slow. It takes a certain amount of time. And so the first image has kind of pre-programmed that chemical reaction, and the next image is kind of living on the after effects of that programming that happened. Here's another one that's kind of slightly strange. This is a completely still image. And my bet is that the majority of you are seeing this just gently shifting backwards and forwards and slightly moving as you look at it. What's happening here is that the visual field that we actually use is a very, very tiny portion of our overall visual field. The picture that we see in our minds as we look at things is actually filled in by sampling little bits of the image, and our eyes skitter about and fill in little pieces of the image. And with this particular image, because the way in which the shapes are, there aren't very good sound references, and so our brain slightly gets it wrong as it moves around, and it looks as though the scene is moving. Here's an even better one. I love this picture. Here there are 4 circles. They don't touch. Really, they don't touch. So I'm going to now blank out the circles one at a time, and you'll be able to see where they are. Okay, now I'm going to remove the black circles and put it back to the original picture, and you still can't see that they don't touch. There's something strange going on here, isn't there? There's something odd. Here's another one, extremely simple. This is another one of those effects of our eyes moving around the scene, sampling the picture. And what you should be seeing is you should be seeing a series of black dots, where there are only white dots at the intersections of the grid. There's a lot going on in the way in which we process images and the way that we process all of our sensory inputs. It's not just a matter of simply sampling the field of view. The colour sense that we talked about before, we don't just sort of measure wavelengths of light, we make deep, intuitive interpretations based on what we think the form of lighting of the scene is, and then we guess at what the colour should be. We make it up. We depending on our perspective, where we're standing, we get a different view. This is one of these pieces of pavement art somewhere in London, and if you just took a few steps one way or another, it would look completely crazy. But right in this position, it looks as though there's something really strange going on underneath this cafe bar in Canary Wharf. And our sensory system is complicated. The way in which it's evolved over time, there's a blind spot right in the middle of our sensory field. The blood vessels that supply our retinas with oxygen are in front of the system that detects the light. And so we have to filter all of that stuff out. So there's a huge amount of processing going on inside our brains before we even get to processing the picture and understanding what's going on. And then, because of this blind spot, we're moving our scene around all the time. Overall, physiologists that measure this kind of thing reckon it takes you about 2 to 3 seconds to capture all of the images in your entire visual field. So it's only with a time resolution of about 2 to 3 seconds that you get this overall picture of what the scene is. All of the rest of the stuff that's going on, your brain is making up. It's extrapolating on. Some time ago, I'm part of me sampling the scene, saw some people walking around the side there. My brain is now extrapolating that they continued walking. Even though I'm not looking, I'm assuming that they're there. And so now I think they're in a different part of the room. That's the way that we work all of the time. And so we're open to fooling ourselves. Here's a little animation of, I assume everybody in the room sees this as a person walking. More than that, I bet that what you see is that you can determine the sex of the person that's walking. Actually, there are no people here. This is an animation. This isn't one of these people with little lights on. This is genuinely just an animation of dots. And all of the stuff about anybody walking, you just made up. This is just as true of any other of our senses. So our sound sense, our auditory sense, is just as open to being confused. I'm going to play you some sounds. These sounds are made up only of sine waves. And if you've not heard these before, you're not going to understand what's being said. Then I'm going to play you the same sentences in English, and then afterwards I'm going to play you the sounds again, and you're going to hear what's going on.
The camel was kept in a cage at the zoo. The camel was kept in a cage at the zoo. The camel was kept in a cage at the zoo. The man read the newspaper at lunchtime. The man read the newspaper at lunchtime. The man read the newspaper at lunchtime. He was sitting at his desk in his office. He was sitting at his desk in his office. He was sitting at his desk in his office. The camel was kept in a cage at the zoo. The man read the newspaper at lunchtime.
Oh, didn't you miss the last one? Sorry. Hold on a minute. So what the psychologists say is that once you've heard those sentences, if you ever hear those again, you'll probably be able to understand what they were saying. Once you've been programmed, just once you know the pattern, our brain is filling in all of this detail. There's so much going on here that is not just a simple matter of sampling the input and just assigning it to the output. It's not that simple. Oops, I did it again. Sorry, let me do this again. Right, this is another one of those things. This is not really a visual thing. This is a cognitive thing. So what I'd like you to do is call out the colour of the words. So it's not impossible, but it's tricky, isn't it? It's hard. As you might imagine, if you do this to preschool children that haven't yet learned to read, it's a lot easier for them. They can do this really well. They'll beat you hands down because they haven't got anything in the way. They're just going to shout. They know everything. They know colours. And they can just shout out the colours. We have programmed ourselves to believe that the meaning of a word is more important than the colour, and therefore, when I show you that sequence of words, your brain is going, okay, so it's saying yellow, but it's in red, and I need to say red, and so that's really slow. That's slowing you down. All of that conscious thought. In the United Kingdom, we're extremely proud at the moment of the fact that we have a world-class tennis player. This is the first time that we've had a world-class tennis player for about 100 years. And so I'm going to go through and let's imagine that we are standing at the other end of the tennis court from Andy Murray, and he's just served, and he's having a bad day. This is a second serve, and so it's only doing about 100 miles an hour. That's about 160 kilometers an hour. So the speed of the serve is about 100 miles an hour. 100 miles an hour is about 45 meters per second. So how long have you got to react to him serving towards you? If you're standing at the other end of the tennis court with your tennis racket, how long have you got to process what you're seeing and to make some decisions and to start things in motion? So first of all, the speed of light is about 300 million meters per second. Roughly. I am nerd enough, science nerd enough, to delight in the fact that means that in 1 nanosecond, light travels about 30 centimeters. That's just really nice. So in 1 nanosecond, that's how far light travels. So we've got about, what have we got? We've got about 78. Oops. So there's oops, sorry. Sorry. Let's get back to where we were. So we've got speed of light travelling about that far in a nanosecond. The length of the tennis court is about 24 meters. So that means that we have roughly 78 nanoseconds for the light to get from Andy Murray's end of the tennis court to our eye. So it's about 78 nanoseconds. Now for the slow bit. So how long does it get for the signal to get from our eye to our brain? So 45 meters or whatever it was, 20 something meters, and then that far. What's the difference in time? Well, Neurophysiologists say that so the connection from our eye to our brain is made up of nerves, and we're kind of doing this chemical process of using the nerves to send the signal, and it takes about 15 milliseconds for the signal to get from your eye to your brain. That's your subconscious brain. So it physically takes that long for it to travel that amount of distance. Then we've got to get to the conscious part of our brain, the part of the brain that allows us to make a real decision on the basis of this information. And that's really slow. That takes about 300 milliseconds for us to cross the gap. So we can go to kind of the unconscious part of our brain quite quickly, in about 15 milliseconds, and then vastly slower than that to take us to the point at which we get a decision. So the time to react, the total time to react, is about 315 milliseconds and a few nanoseconds. The distance to react is about 14 meters. So the length of the tennis court was only 24 meters. So what we're talking about here is that in order for you to make a conscious decision on what you've seen Andy Murray do at the other end of the tennis court, the ball is still on his side of the tennis court before it's too late for you to change your mind, before it's too late for you to do anything but have sent the signal to react. Actually, it's much worse than that. What really happens is that sportsmen train themselves to try and make the decision less conscious and try and eliminate this slow part through lots and lots of practice. That's when this comes in, the idea of fast and slow thinking. So neurophysiologists have kind of measured the way in which we think. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples of this. So first I'm going to show you a couple of calculations. Here's the first one. And here's the second one. My bet is that you had two entirely different experiences running through your head when I showed you those calculations. The first calculation, what will have happened is that your subconscious mind will have recognized that calculation and presented the answer to your conscious mind before your conscious mind had time to recognize that I'd put the calculation on the screen. So the picture would have come on the screen and you just knew the answer. It would have been that fast. The second calculation, my bet is that what happened was something like, what's going through your head is, Dave's just put a calculation on the screen. Do I know the answer to this one? No, I don't. Can I be bothered to work it out? No, I can't. Okay, I'm going to wait for the answer. And it was something like that was going on. What I'm demonstrating here is the difference between what's called fast and slow thinking, also known as System 1 and System 2 thinking. So, we have two different modes of processing information. Here's another example. Could everybody in the room please fold your arms? Okay. Now could you fold your arms the other way around? My bet is that the second time that felt strange. It felt weird. Something different was going on in your brain. There was more consciousness involved the second time because you're not used to doing it. Since you were a tiny child, you've learned to fold your arms and you do that the same all of the time. I've done this presentation enough now that I'm starting to learn to be able to fold my arms the other way around, and so I'm getting better at it. But still, it feels weird compared to doing it the other way around. You can measure this. You can figure out what's going on in people's brains. You can put people inside fMRI brain scanners and see the difference to what's happening inside their brains when these different kinds of thinking go on. The first one we're seeing System 1 thinking, the fast thinking. And it's a tiny, tiny part of the brain you use. The second one, the brain is lighting up like a city at night. You are literally burning more calories when you're doing System 2 thinking. This is where all rational thought lives. Guess what? We are programmed to try and avoid it. It's too expensive, it burns too many calories. We are evolved to try and not think rationally. It's literally hard work. As a result of not thinking rationally, we tend to jump to conclusions. We tend to prefer fast answers to questions rather than accurate answers to questions. We tend to suffer from problems like confirmation bias, where we go and seek information that will confirm the guesses that we've already made, rather than seek information that gets to some more fundamental level of truth. We can only combat this programming through a deliberate act of will and practice. The persistence of discredited beliefs, preference for certain information, illusory association between events, these are all kind of common parts of the human experience. We all suffer from these biases in the way in which we think. Here's an example of several of those biases at play. I hope. Plan by an inspirational coach. At another level, this was just a failure of the other team to really recognise what was going on and to react. Talking about persistence and discredited belief, there's one guy on the defensive side at one point who's standing there who needed to take one step to block the guy that's running past, and he's just standing there saying, "What's going on?" and just lets him run past. So we're at a software conference. What's my point? This is my point. Science, the act of deliberate problem solving, of the four-step process of the scientific method, is the way that we as a species have learned to overcome the handicaps that we all exhibit as a species. Our tendency to jump to conclusions because it's cheaper in terms of brain power than to think rationally and go through a deliberate series of problem-solving steps has led us to come up with things that don't work very well very often. We come up with waterfall processes for developing software. It doesn't work very well. We come up with predictions of the sort of software that we're going to put to our users. We guess at what's going to be the design that's going to work for our users. We guess whether the software that we've written is going to work because we don't test it enough. All of these things are kind of a function of us not applying the sort of rational scientific mindset to solving our problems. I think that's a mistake. I think that when we do start to apply these sorts of more deliberate techniques, and it's hard because we're programmed to try and avoid this sort of rational thought, but we get better results. I'm talking about being experimental, and I think that one of the things that we've learned over the last less than a decade really in terms of software, our approach to software development, is that applying the thinking of science at the level of the scientific method is what it really takes to make software effectively, efficiently, high quality. That's what it takes. That's fundamentally, being experimental is why all agile approaches to software development work. At their root, that's what they are about. This is a picture, you can probably tell from the tone of my conversation that I'm a bit of a science nerd, and this is a picture of Richard Feynman, the Nobel Prize winning physicist. He came up with the theory of quantum electrodynamics, that it's the most accurate predictive tool that humanity's ever come up with, a genuine genius. But he was also great for kind of philosophizing on science, and a genuinely honest, rigorous approach to the experimental, empirical approach to science. And here are a few quotes from him which kind of resonate very strongly with me. Science is the belief in the ignorance of experts. Don't just believe that some product is going to solve your software problems because the vendors of that product say it's going to solve your software problems. Don't just believe people like me that come and stand on a stage and tell you stuff. Go and do an experiment, try something out, learn, adapt, move on. That's what works. The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you're the easiest person to fool. We need to be intellectually rigorous, we need to test ourselves, we need to be cautious of the conclusions that we jump to. And our first thought, whenever we come up with a guess or a hypothesis, to put it into the scientific jargon, is how do I test that hypothesis? It's not, am I right? It's how can I falsify it? How can I show that it's wrong? What information would it take for me to know that this is mistaken? It doesn't matter how intelligent you are, if you guess and that guess cannot be backed by scientific by experimental evidence, then it's still a guess. We need to find ways of carrying out experiments. That's what being iterative is about. That's what automated testing is about. That's what continuous integration is about. That's what continuous delivery is about. That's what A/B testing is about. All of these principles that we think of as foundational to modern, high-quality engineering practice, software development practice, are rooted in this idea of being experimental. So what am I talking about? I'm not talking about space shuttles and large hadron colliders, or even Elon Musk's plans to go to the planet Mars. I'm talking about this, the simple scientific method. As a species, Homo sapiens has existed for around about 200,000 years. And for most measures, for 200,000 years, we've been roughly flatlined. And then, about 200 or 300 years ago, on most measures of progress, the line started to tick up and just simply went exponential through the 20th century, the latter half of the 20th century, and all of the 21st century. The amount of information we process, people estimate that the total amount of human knowledge roughly doubles roughly once every 14 months. We are on this runaway train of learning, and it's as a result of this. It's applying this kind of more solid reasoning to thinking about hard problems. Here's another little example. Have people seen this before, this picture? The idea is which orange dot is larger, the one on the left or the one on the right? Who says the one on the right is bigger? Yeah? Who says it's the one on the left? Who says they're both the same? Ah, you've all seen this before. Here's my experiment. Okay? Here's another one. Have you seen this one before as well? Yeah. So which line is longer, the one on the left or the one on the right? Who says the one on the left is longer? Who says the one on the right is longer? Who says they're both the same? Okay, here's my experiment. I lied, the one on the right is longer. I cheated. You can't guess. I just fooled you all into guessing, and you can't guess. You have to experiment. You have to measure. I want to tell you a little story. So when I was 8 was when men landed on the moon. So the Apollo program is a special thing to me. I think it's a really important thing. And it all started with JFK giving this speech to Congress in 1961. At this point in history, this was the point in history where all of America's rockets were blowing up on the launch pad. They hadn't yet put anything into orbit. Alan Shepard, the first American into space, this was about 2 or 3 weeks after he'd done his first suborbital lob, he went 100 miles up and came back down in a sort of ballistic trajectory on what was a missile booster. And JFK goes into Congress and says, we're putting a man in the moon before the end of the century, before the end of the decade. And all of the people in NASA went, because they didn't know how to do any of this. So here's the vision that JFK's just planted in the minds of all of the world, but all of the people in NASA certainly. And here's the stuff that they didn't know how to do, which is basically all of the stuff that you need to be able to do to get a man onto the moon and back. They hadn't yet done a multi-stage vehicle. They hadn't yet done docking in space. They hadn't yet had the idea of building a modular system where each spacecraft was targeted at just one job. So you had the service module, which would go from the Earth to the Moon. You had the command module, which would look after the astronauts and bring them back to Earth at the end. You had the LEM, the Lunar Excursion module, which would, the bottom part would take them down, the top part would bring them back up again. It was all broken down into all these little components. This is the space-age version of microservice architecture. None of this stuff did they know how to do. If you think about the way that an organisation like NASA might approach this sort of problem, you would think about these sorts of heavyweight documents, and these sorts of things played a part. But at the root was this vision of where they were going and how, and what they do. So when you're faced with a problem on this kind of scale, how do you tackle something like this? So here's the problem. Here's the Earth and the Moon, and this is the Earth-Moon system, and this is a kind of child's storybook picture of the Earth-Moon system. Unfortunately, this is not what the Earth-Moon system looks like. This is a picture of the Earth-Moon system to scale. At the point in history where JFK said we're sending a man to the Moon, no human artifacts had been more than 1 pixel away from the Earth. That's the scale of the problem that we're talking about here. So when you've got that kind of problem, where do you start? How do you try and solve a problem that's that difficult? Well, you can imagine the thinking at NASA. So how are we going to do this? So I know, let's build a rocket, put 3 astronauts in it, send them to the Moon and see if they come back. Well, it's not an ideal kind of first experiment if you want to carry on having a space program. So what's a simpler experiment? How can we learn more than just seeing if we're lucky on the first go? Well, I know. Let's put some astronauts in the spaceship, fly them to the Moon, and just leave them there. No, that doesn't work either. I know. Let's do away with the astronauts. Why don't we send a robot spaceship to the Moon and see if it can come back? Oh, that's better. It's not going to kill the astronauts. Maybe we'll carry on with some funding for a while if we do that. Yeah, but that's not the simplest experiment, is it? I know. Why don't we try and fire a robot spaceship from the Earth to the Moon and land it on the Moon? We'd learn loads from that. Yeah, that's a really good idea, but there's a lot going on there. There's a lot of stuff still. What does landing mean? Well, it doesn't have to survive the landing. You could just crash it into the Moon. We'd learn a lot just from that. Okay, so that's where this space program came in. This was the Ranger program, and this was basically spaceships as bullets shot at the Moon to see if they could hit it. That was the goal of this program. So how did that go? Well, the first one, the objective of the first Ranger program was to just get it into orbit. Remember what I said, that the rockets were all blowing up on the pad? Guess what happened? The rocket blew up on the pad. The second one, the rocket blew up on the pad. The third one, if you've worked in any large projects, you'll recognise this. So the planners at NASA, they've had 2 failures, but now they say, okay, enough of this trying to get to orbit, we're going to go for the Moon. So they got it into orbit. Yay! They did the deorbit burn to fire it off towards the Moon, and they shot it towards the Moon and missed the Moon. Ranger 4, they got it into orbit. They did the deorbit burn. They fired off, and just after they'd fired it off and left Earth orbit, all of the systems failed. They managed to track it from the ground, and they saw that it hit the Moon, but they had no data. Ranger 5 missed again. Ranger 6, it all worked. They got the telemetry back, but the cameras failed, so they got no pictures. So they were nearly there, but not quite. Ranger 7 was a success. Ranger 8 was a success. Ranger 9 was a success. This is how you solve big problems. You solve them by dividing them up into lots of small problems, and we call those problems experiments. We design lots of small experiments, we carry out the experiments, we predict what might happen from the experiments, and then we try and carry out the experiments and try and learn from what we see. What would have happened if NASA had done the first thing? They just fired it off to the moon and either killed all the astronauts or it had actually worked. They would have thought, yeah, we know how to do this. Then they send the next lot of astronauts and they'd have all died. They wouldn't have learned anything. They really learn through the failures of the experiments. Being experimental doesn't mean that you have to be safe. Being experimental means trying things out in a way that you can afford to fail. In fact, at some level, it's quite good to fail. You learn more from the experiments that fail than the ones that succeed. If your experiment succeeds, it's just reinforcing the opinions that you already had. If your experiment fails, you're now going, blimey, what happened there? How did we fix this? And you learn, and you adapt, and you move on. This is a little psychology experiment that's been carried out across the world through different groups of people over many years. And I carry this out in training courses. There are some people in the room that attended one and built towers out of spaghetti and string with me last year. And the idea is that you build a tower out of spaghetti, string and sticky tape, and you try and build the tower as tall as you can to support the weight of a marshmallow. And it's a lot of fun and it's good, but the real stuff that's interesting is what you're really looking at is you're looking at the way that people work and the way that team dynamics works. And what's really interesting is not so much the towers that you build, although you do tend to see some beautiful structures from time to time. But really what you're interested in is this, it's the data that comes out of this. So the average, I'm sorry, this is an imperial measure, this is American data. So the average height for these towers is about 20 inches, so about that kind of height to support a marshmallow. And you can see over here that groups of CEOs do a little bit better than average. But interestingly, groups of CEOs with an executive admin in the group do better. So what's going on there? That's an interesting thing. What's happening there? Well, mostly what most groups of adults do is that they spend the first 5 or 10 minutes kind of negotiating, kind of doing the social politics thing. They're all trying to say, so who in this group's going to have good ideas? Who's going to do what I tell them? Who's going to think that I'm important? Who's going to do the real work? And how's this going to work out? Who's the person with good ideas that we can use to do? And there's that little negotiation that goes on. As it turns out, what tends to happen is if you have an admin assistant, an executive admin, they facilitate that conversation and that conversation goes more quickly, and so you get to doing stuff sooner if you've got an executive admin in the group, and so they do better. Engineers and architects, they do very well at this, and you'd expect them to. They have specialist knowledge, they understand structures and so on. But what really stands out is this line. Kindergarten children beat the average of adult business school students and lawyers at being able to build towers out of spaghetti to support marshmallows. Why does that happen? Well, as I said, what usually happens with groups of adults is that they do this sort of social negotiation and then they come up with a plan. And they say, okay, so we're going to build a structure like this, you go away and do this, you go away and do this, I'll do this, and then we'll all come together and we'll make stuff work. And they come back and they build this tower, and then they put the marshmallow on the top, which is quite a lot heavier than they think, and the tower falls over. That's what nearly always happens. What kindergarten children do is different. What kindergarten children do is that they get 3 sticks of spaghetti and they put the marshmallow on the top and they put it on the ground and they go, yay! And then they build it up so it goes higher and they go, yay! And then higher, and it goes, yeah! That's what happens. So they're experimenting. They're trying out, just pure experimentation beats everything except specialist knowledge in the field. Pure experimentation. And specialist knowledge in the field, guess where that comes from? Experimentation. This is an important idea. This affects a lot of the way in which we solve hard problems. This is Edwards Deming. If you're at an Agile conference, maybe you're familiar with his work. Deming was the American that went to Japan at the end of the Second World War and revolutionised the way in which their industry worked, and turned Japan into the economic powerhouse that it was through the late 20th century as a result. And what Deming was doing was really doing what I'm talking about, trying to apply the scientific method to, in his case, production engineering. And he came up with this model, Plan, Do, Study, Act, which is a direct lift of the experimental method from science. So this is exactly the same four-stage process. So we want to plan a change or test and act at improvement. We want to carry out the change or test, preferably on a small scale. So if it goes wrong, it's not going to kill us. We want to study the results and find out what we learned. And we want to adopt the change, abandon it, or run through the cycle again. This simple iterative cycle, this simple experimental cycle to try out our ideas, find out what happens, adapt, evolve, change direction, pivot, is fundamental to a high quality process. And that's where ideas like lean thinking come from. My own stuff, the continuous delivery ideas, is very strongly grounded in trying to apply some of these, I think of them as engineering principles, as in the application of science to solving practical problems, to software development. And so, we get to this is continuous delivery. We want to looking to work in iterative ways, have small steps, automate things so we get high quality feedback so that we can learn and change our minds, find out where we're wrong, adapt, move, shift. Software is important in the world. You're probably tired of hearing that. It's becoming a bit of a cliche that people say how important it is, but it's true. Our generations are living through a revolution. That's on the same scale as the agricultural revolution or the industrial revolution. That's what we're in the midst of now. And software is transforming the world. People's lives depend on software. Sorry, the feedback to this is being rather slow, which is fooling me on my clip. Yeah, go on. So when our software goes wrong, it has serious implications. People's lives depend on the software that we write sometimes. Now, there's a lot of stuff that we talk about in software development circles, and we try and analyse what software is. Software's weird stuff is this ephemeral, abstract thing that we create. And we create it in teams, and it's difficult to comprehend, and it's difficult to understand what's going on. I would argue that in many ways, software development is one of the more difficult things that we as a species undertake. And if it's so important, and if it's so difficult, shouldn't we be employing our strongest problem-solving technique to it? Shouldn't we be using science, the scientific method, to approach problems in software development? I think that we should. The sorts of things that go wrong with software, sometimes you end up working on software for my mum's cake shop, and that's perhaps not as important as a space shuttle or something like that. But there are times when people's lives literally depend on this stuff. Personally, I would rather fly in an aeroplane that had been built by engineers rather than built by craftsmen. I think that there is an aspect of craftsmanship in software development. I think it's important to take care and pride in our work. But I also think that we need discipline and we need to be thinking rationally and making high quality decisions. That means that we need to be testing things. That means that we need to be automating things. We need to be using automated tests as a platform for experimentation for all of the software that we create. We need to be using automated deployment as a platform for experimenting with the ideas to get them into production so that we can get feedback and learn from them. This stuff is important. And when you start practicing software development this way, it's like the scales falling from your eyes. The productivity and the quality are in a different place to traditional software development. And I think that's why Agile software development in general is important. And my thing, continuous delivery in particular, is important because it helps us get to this more rational, science-based approach to carrying out experiments on our ideas. Here's another little case study. So this is the Vancouver Stock Exchange. And this was written, the software for this was written a long time ago. And when it was launched in 1982, the stock index was initialized at a value of 1,000. It's nice to have round numbers, it's somewhere to start. And then, over a period of trading for the next few years, it was updated and truncated to 3 decimal places on every trade, about 3,000 times a day. Sorry, yeah, 3,000 times a day. The truncation led to a loss of around 25 points a month. When they corrected the problem, 2 years later, the error added up to almost doubling the value of the index overnight. They corrected the rounding error. Some of these errors are subtle. They're not the kinds of things that, however smart we are, we're necessarily going to predict or understand. So with hindsight, you can look at this and say, this is obvious that this was a bad idea. But when you're writing the code, at the point at which you're designing this stuff, maybe not so much. So carrying out this way so that you can evaluate the change, understand its implications, and not necessarily get it right first time, but to be able to trivially fix it when we learn that it's wrong, is part of this game. So what is it that we really want? And I would argue that any organisation that practices software development is looking for this. We want to be able to have an idea, we want to be able to get that idea into the hands of our users, and we want to figure out what our users make of our ideas. That's it. That's why all of us are employed, that's why all of us are here today at this conference. That is fundamentally what all software development is about, to my mind. So I think that's a good starting point. I think we should be looking to optimise that cycle. We should be trying to make that as efficient as we can make it. We use the idea of cycle time, measuring as a proxy for that, having an idea and getting into the idea of users. We can measure our processes and figure out what makes them efficient and what doesn't. We can look so this is a traditional kind of cycle time, a slow process where you don't learn anything for hundreds of days, and this is a more agile way of thinking. So this is a continuous delivery process where you get the high quality feedback in under an hour. I tend to think these days of software development processes like this. It's really all about the feedback cycles. It's really all about the experiments that we can carry out at different levels of granularity. At the outside, our experiments are in the form of getting software into the hands of our users and figuring out what they make of it. At the inside, we have automated testing to assert that our ideas, to assert that as a developer, the code's doing what I think the code should be doing, line by line. To do that kind of thing takes you've got to be good at an awful lot of stuff. There's an awful lot of things to this. And it's broader than that. It's not just about all of those practices around development. It's not just the technical things. It's also about the human things. We need to work in a way so we can learn and adapt. We need to tune our processes. We need to experiment at the level of what works for us in our organisation, with our team, with our group of technologies, with our problem. Being experimental is important. I think it's really important to try and avoid jumping to conclusions. We need to stop guessing about what should happen, and we need to think, so okay, if that's my idea, how would I try that idea? What's the cheapest way, the simplest way that I could evaluate that idea? How can I get to an answer to that more quickly? That's what we're looking for. We don't want to start work based on guesses. We want to start work based on maybe a hypothesis that we can test. We don't want to do things because we've always done it that way. There's no rule that says we've got to carry on doing bad things. We need to learn and adapt, and everything is on the table. If I find something that works better for me than continuous delivery, I will drop it in a heartbeat. If I find something that works better than being experimental, which I seriously doubt, I will drop it in a heartbeat. That's the mindset. We need to just do what works. We learn, adapt, evolve evolve our approach to solutions. We must not be afraid of experiments failing because that's important. We need to be able to carry out experiments. We need to be able to accept that some of them will fail and welcome the fact that some of them fail. In fact, if you're never going to fail in your experiment, you're not experimenting. You're just reinforcing your guesses. And don't assume that experts know the answer. Don't assume that just because you can download some library or other, that's going to work. Don't assume that you can buy some product that's going to solve all your problems. Don't assume that the users know what they want. None of that's true. We've got to experiment in all of those spheres. We've got to evaluate the team tools that we use. We've got to evaluate the techniques that we use. We've got to evaluate our design decisions. We've got to evaluate the code that we write. We've got to evaluate our assumptions with our of what our users will like. We need to question everything. We need to question every aspect of the way that we work. We need to always be thinking about how to improve, how to adapt, how to expand our capabilities, how to be faster, more efficient, more effective, produce higher quality. Always looking and refining. Make your first response to any idea, how can I test this? We need to work iteratively, in small steps. It's very, very common to talk in Agile practice these days. There was a slide put up at the start here saying there was a 65% of organisations are adopting or looking to adopt Agile in Turkey. My guess is that a significant proportion of those organisations are actually still doing waterfall, but they're doing it within the framework of Scrum. That's my guess of what's going on, because that's what's going on across a large part of the world. There's a significant difference between really getting to the benefits of this stuff, really practicing the principles of Agile development, and just following the mantra, just doing stand-ups every day. If you're working and you're not releasing software at the end of iteration, not really Agile. If you're working and you're not really communicating with your customers, your users, in some manner on a regular basis, not really Agile. If you're not using automated testing and continuous integration, I would argue, not really Agile. These are very difficult things to do, but they are very, very effective practices. Think about how to apply the ideas from science. I've used all of these ideas in my development practice over the last few years to great effect. It really works. So, falsifiability, automated tests. How many tests do you need? You can never have enough tests to prove that your software is good, but you can work in a way so that as soon as one test fails, you discard the change. You know that it's not good enough. So you can falsify, you can use automated testing to falsify your ideas. Skeptical mind, always thinking about, well, we've got this idea, but how do we validate this, or how do we prove that it's wrong? That's a great way in. The scientific method, applying this four-step process to all of the ways in which we work. Reproducibility, working in ways so that we get deterministic outcomes from everything that we do. And peer review, looking to get feedback from other organisations, other people in your organisation, pair programming, all of those sorts of things. All of these things come to play and make up what I think of as a modern engineering approach to software development based on Agile principles. And I want to leave you really with the thought of Richard Feynman. In particular, it doesn't matter how intelligent you are, even if you're a genuine first-class genius like Feynman, it doesn't matter how smart you are. If you guess and you can't back it up by experimental evidence, it's still only a guess. Okay, so we're approaching the end, and my guess is that you're all thinking, so, Dave said that there were 3 laws, and he's talked about 2 of them. He's talked about stuff being complicated, and he's talked about people are crap. What about the other one? Well, I hope this presentation shows all of them. So, now, to be clear, I'm not trying to invent a new religion or anything, but I would like to take this seriously. Farley's 3 laws. People are crap. Stuff is more complicated than you think. All stuff is interesting if you look at it in the right way. Thank you very much.